Okay, today we are going to do a custom VPC demo, and as you can see on the screen, this is the configuration for our custom VPC. We are going to create two subnets, private and public, and then we are going to create an internet gateway so we can connect to that server, and we are going to create the routing table, the security groups necessary for our VPCs, and then we are going to set up a launch a web server which we all can access from our browsers, and then we will launch a private server also in the private subnet which can be reached only from our public web server. So we will try to connect through the private server through SSH connection. So that is what we are going to do in the demo right now. Let's go ahead and get started with the console. No, so go ahead. That is what I was planning to do. So I have logged into my account. I'm using the Mumbai region, and that's my favorite region. And then I'm going to services, and then you can find the VPC services from the dashboard, or you can search it for the VPCs and click on that. So let us say VPC, click on that. It will take you to the dashboard. And there are multiple ways of creating the VPC. Let us not use the VPC wizard. That makes it a little bit complicated, or depending upon the point of view. I would not recommend starting it from the VPC wizard from the initial few days until you get comfortable with what is happening in the VPCs or what are the components that is necessary for a VPC. So instead, go to click on your VPCs, and here you can see the Amazon has by default created a VPC under the 172 private IP address series. So leave that as it is. Go ahead and click on create VPC, and we will call you will get a dashboard with asking for information. So we will name our VPC as let us call it Valaxy VPC itself. That is fine. I'm going to choose an IP address of 10.81.0. Blah blah blah. I'm going to 23. Did I give it right? Yeah, 23. It should work, and leave the rest of the things by default itself. We are not going to create an IPv6 IP address, but if you want to go ahead and IPv6, if you know how to set up a hexadecimal octet, go ahead and do that. But for now, for learning purposes, let us stick with IPv4 and learn this properly. Go ahead and click on create after this. I'm just mentally checking whether the CIDR range I have given is correct and whether 255 IP addresses will be available or not. Okay, the first step is creating the VPC, and we have created it. If you want, you can go ahead and tag it. Additional tags. I already have one tag which is called Valaxy VPC. This is important because when we go to some of the other tabs on the left hand side, we might have to search for our VPC or the VPC ID. Instead, the name helps us to find it out. So we have named it as Valaxy VPC. Remember that because we are going to reuse that quite often next. So next is creating the subnets. That is, I am in Mumbai, so there are two availability zones available, 1A and 1B, and by the default VPC has been created, that is on the 172 series. But let us go ahead and create our subnets now. So I'm going to say VPC, Valaxy VPC or Valaxy subnet in 1A availability zone, and I'm just quickly going down here in the availability zone. Also, I'm choosing 1A here, and I'm going to choose this also as my VPC, that is Valaxy VPC. So you see here this has changed to my VPC address to 10.81.1.0/24. This will give me 255 IP addresses, whereas 23 means it has a total of about 512, and /24 should give me 255 IP addresses. I will go ahead and click on create. Before that, remember, I'm going to choose one for 1A. It is creating. We will create this is going to be our public IP address. So you see here Valaxy subnet. I'm just going to go ahead and type here Valaxy so that we will see only the subnets that is relevant to us. So 1A has been created and it has a maximum of 251. If you remember, Amazon is going to use 4 of those IP addresses for internal reasons. So I'm going to click on create again so that we'll create a subnet for 1B. And I'm just going to say Valaxy subnet 1B. And then I'm going to choose here as availability zone as 1B and then 10.81. Did I give 1 there? Oh, great. I made a mistake there. Yes, and create. Okay, great. So we have created 2 subnets, one for 1A and another one for 1B, and 1B is associated with the availability zone 1B and 1A is availability zone 1A here. So next is setting up our internet gateway. We'll come back to routing table in a while, but before that we will enable our internet gateway and attach it to our VPC. So click on internet gateway, click on create internet gateway, and I'm just going to say Valaxy internet gateway IGW should be enough, and there's only couple of clicks. So by default it lists all the internet gateways. Let us search only for the ones that we are relevant to, and as of now by default state is detached. We need to attach it to a VPC by using this button at the top. Click on attach VPC. Come on. Yep, and it is showing the only VPC that doesn't have an internet gateway, and I'm just going to click on that and ensure that it is selected. Click on yes, attach. So now our internet gateway is also attached. The next step is to create the routing tables so that all the internet bound traffic is sent to the internet gateway. So that is the reason we went to set up the internet gateway first, and we are going to come back to the routing table now. So by default, there are other routing tables are there. Let me just search for the ones by default. As you remember from the lessons that we learned before, by default, Amazon creates a default routing table. That is what you see here. Let us not touch this. As you can see here, main equal to S. Let us not touch this. Let us always create a custom routing table, and let us name it Valaxy route table RTP. That should be enough for us to understand. Just select our VPC, ensure that we are always doing it in our VPC. Just select that and click on create. And now we just create a routing table. There are no rules inside it. If I just selected the routing table here, and if I click on routes here, you will see there only the local traffic is there. That is any inbound traffic, that is a traffic inside this routing table, all will be targeted locally only. As you can see here, the target is all local. There is no internet bound traffic there. So I am going to click on edit, and I'm going to click on add another route, and I'm going to say all internet bound traffic are going to go to my internet gateway. So I don't know my internet gateway. I'm just going to click here and see what happens. And by default, Amazon picks up the internet gateway and gives you that. If it doesn't give you, you can just go ahead and copy the internet gateway, this ID that will be available from your internet gateway dashboard, copy it and paste it here and click on save. Now the next thing that we need to do is associate it with a routing table. Remember, we are having 2 subnets, that is 1A, that is going to be our public, and 1B, that is going to be our private. What I can do is I can go to the subnets and just rename them or add another tag here saying this is going to be my private, so we can easily remember it, and this is going to be my public. So just for easy reference, so that we don't get confused when you're trying to configure our routing tables as well. So I'm going to associate it with only my public here, because only my public needs to communicate with the internet. So I'm just checking once again, public is selected, and then click on select. I'm not selecting the private here, so my private is cannot send internet traffic through this route table. and only this route table is associated with only one subnet, and that subnet is also my public subnet. So whereas all my local traffic is by default allowed. So that is all is there to go here and do it. And if you remember, I spoke about DNS host names and DNS server. I forgot to show that when you're setting up the VPC itself. Let us go ahead and do that as well. Click on your VPC that is on the left hand side. Let us search for only our interested VPC, Valaxy. So by default it is selected. Click on actions, that is at the top, and once you click on options you get this different options. You just go ahead and check whether DHCP options is set or not. This is the first thing that we need to check. By default you should get something like a DOPT, that is something like this, and if it is already set, leave it. You don't have to do anything. Can click on cancel and come out and do the next option, that is edit DNS resolutions, and by default it is yes for me. Yes, great, don't have to change anything. And edit DNS host names, and you can see here it is not creating the DNS host names by default, so I'm going to click on yes so that my DNS host names are available, and click on save here. So that is all there to set up our VPC. Next thing is that we need to do is secure our VPC. So for securing our VPC, what I'm going to do is I'm just scrolling down, and you can see here there are two options that is allowing me to create security there. First we'll click on security group and then search for only Valaxy so that we focus only there. And I'm going to create a security group that is going to be attached to this one. That is a default security group. Amazon by default creates one, and if you go to inbound rules, you can see here all internal traffic is allowed within the same security group. This is the number, the 225 that you can see here also. So all traffic internally is allowed, and if you go to outbound, all external traffic is allowed to the internet or any IP address, in other words. So everything is allowed internally, and outbound to the world is allowed. So let it the default security group be as it is. Let me just create one more, and I'm just going to call it as Valaxy public security group, that is SG, and I'm going to create same name as well here as well. I'm just going to attach it to my this is custom configurable. As you can see, I'm just copy pasting. You can have the name of the security group anything you want, and I'm attaching it to my Valaxy VPC. As you can see here, it is attached to Valaxy VPC. Click on create. It should show up in the dashboard anytime now. So you can see here the one is default. If you can see my mouse here, the group name one is by default, another one is that I have created just now. And let me go ahead and select that one. And in the inbound rules, the default one that we now created, there are no inbound rules as of now. And you can see here all outbound rules are allowed to the internet traffic. So since inbound is nothing, the outbound doesn't make any sense. So let me click on edit, and we are going to set up an SSH and HTTPD server. So I'm just going to say for the HTTP server, that is my web server, allow all the internet traffic to connect, and I'm going to add another rule so that I can connect to the server if anything goes wrong. For now, I'm adding an internet here, but in production, most probably you will configure your IP address or your bastion host IP addresses here. So let us, for the demo, let us leave this as a public itself. So that should not be a problem. Click on save. And so we have set up our public security group. The next step is setting up a private security group. Again, what I'm going to do is click on create security group, and I'm going to say Valaxy private security group SG. I'm just going to copy this and put this in the description. You should have more proper description here elaborating on what is the security group and what is it does, so that you can easily remember what it is going to do. And I'm selecting my private VPC here. Click on create. And you can see here there are three automatically that is brought up. I'm going to select the private one, and I'm going to create an inbound rule here. And I want the servers in my private group available from only my public. So I'm going to connect to that server SSH, and I'm going to say inbound is going to be only from my public. If you're thinking where this SG is coming from, if you just go up and look here, this is the address, that is the shouldn't have clicked on it anyway. Let me do that again. So this 1E51 is nothing but the source is going to be from my public security group. So anybody inside my public already can connect to my private resources. So that is what this is going to do. Click on save. That is all we are going to do here. So for now, let us leave it as it is. This is all that is we need to do for setting up a custom VPC. There are other things like network ACLs for tightening the security even more, adding VPN connection, VPN gateways. For a basic demo, we are good and set right now. And let us start some servers in those subnets and try to access them next. I'm going to head over to my EC2 dashboard, just quickly duplicate this tab and click on services, click on EC2. Since we saw already EC2, I'm just going to breeze through the configuration as much as possible. I'm just going to start a Red Hat instance here. In free tier, go to the instance configuration, and this is where you should be paying a little bit more attention in the instance configuration page. Here you have the networks, and under networks we usually leave it as default. Now it is time that we start customizing our network instances also. So you go ahead and click on the drop down and choose the Valaxy VPC here, and I'm going to start a server first in the public instance. So I'm just going to make sure that the public IP address is selected, that is availability zone 1A, and this will be getting in the 10.81.1 series. Availability 1A means 1 series, remember that. 1B means 0 series. So I would need a public IP address so that I can connect to my web server as well. And I'm just going to attach a role so that I can talk to my S3 bucket and I can pick up some files from my S3 bucket. So I'm going to choose that role here. The next step is I've created an IAM role, and then next is go to advanced configuration details so that I can copy paste the commands that I want to run when it is booting. So since I'm going to start up a web server, I'm just going to add some commands that will paste there right now. So you can see here I just wrote up some commands here. What it does is it installs HTTP server and starts the services, and this command will enable the service to start on boot itself. When the server is restarting or booting, the service will be started, and this is the command that will copy some items from my bucket to my destination server. And since we have an IAM role, I don't have to worry about giving access to this server or IP username and password. Only this IAM role will be able to talk to my bucket, and it will be able to copy the files and put it in this location. So we should be able to start seeing it when you try to access the IP address. Let's go ahead and click on add storage. Nothing to do there. Click on add name tag. Let us say the name tag is something like Valaxy public server. Click on security group. Here is where we attach our public security group to our servers. So click on select an existing security group. It will list by default the three options that we have. Let us go ahead and ensure that we are selecting the public one here. So public, port 80 is open, port 22 is open. Click on review and launch, and review all the configurations if you want to. Click on launch if you're sure, and ensure the key that you have is selected. Click on launch instance. So we have launched our public instance. While it is booting, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly launch another instance that is going to be our private instance. Since it is in pending state, meanwhile, instead of waiting, we can just go ahead and launch a private instance as well. Again, I'm going to select Amazon Linux this time, and click on default free tier, net configuration details. Go ahead and select Valaxy VPC, and ensure that you are going to choose the private subnet here, because we are going to start a private server right now. And the interesting thing is I'm not going to assign a private IP address to this server. We are just going to leave this as default or disable, in other words, so that this is not publicly accessible server. This doesn't have a public IP address, so we can connect to the server only using the private IP address. And once again, I'm still going to choose a Valaxy IAM role. I'm going to configure it to the web server so that we can just quickly connect to it and see whether it is running or not. I'm going to do a curl or a wget for the web page locally, and then click on add storage. Nothing here. Click on add tags. So you can see here by default it lists all the tags that is selected that we have created just now. Click on configuration, security group, and I'm going to ensure that my private security group, that is this one, is selected here. So by default SSH is only enabled. What I will do is I'll just go ahead and add port to 80 also, so that we can access it from this source group. Click on review and launch. Click on launch, select the Mumbai key, click on launch, and let it get booted. I'm just going to quickly go ahead and add my private port 80 as well. Save. So you can see here this IP address is from this source group, port 80 and port 22 both are allowed here. I just now added this one. Let's go ahead and check our EC2 dashboard and connect it to our public security group. Connect to our public instance, not security group. So I'm going to filter it by name tag. Is that name is there? Yeah, tag, and it has Valaxy. So only those two are available. Great. And while the private server is still initializing, let us go ahead and click on the public and get the IP address of the public server and put it in our browser and see we are able to access it. I'm going to give it to you guys as well. You can check it yourselves. Just going to put it in the browser. If everything worked fine, we should be able to see a web page. So what we have done quickly is to summarize or recap for first part of it. We have created a custom VPC, and inside the VPC we created two subnets, private and public, and inside the public we started an EC2 instance which is running a web server, and for that web server we gave it an IAM role and we copied some data from S3 buckets, and we are able to access that website from our IP address. We did not log into the server, we did not do any manual configuration, everything was thoroughly automated. Very simple website, but in real cases, a simple scenario like this is executed. So we have set up our public server. Next step is going and checking whether our private server is accessible or not. Let us go ahead and click on the dashboard and see what is the IP address for our private server. And this, as you can see here, I'm on the Amazon EC2 dashboard. I have just selected my private server, and you can see here it only has a private IP address, and then there is no public IP address or public DNS. It is nowhere reachable from that point. It has only a private DNS. So the only way I can connect to is after connecting to this public server. So let me quickly go ahead and connect to my public instance. So come over to your favorite terminal client. I have one already configured. Just going to ensure that we have the IP address and everything is correct. This is the public IP address of our server, and ensure that the private key is there, and then click OK, and then double click on it. We should be able to get connected anytime soon. Great. Come on. Okay, there we go. I'm just going to minimize it so we have a bigger screen, and I'm just going to jump to root because we might have to create a key which allows us to connect to the private server. So if I can do service HTTPD, I'm just showing you that it is running and up and running. You can see here it is by default running, and this server is absolutely configured without me logging into the server. So if I, and we need to ping the target's private server now. Let us go ahead and copy the private server IP address. And one more thing I'd like to highlight before I go ahead and copy, you can see here this IP address series is from one series, that is 1A availability zone. That is my public subnet. So the pinging IP address is going to be private subnet and it will have a 0 series here. Let me just go ahead and copy it from the dashboard. So my private IP address is here, that is 10.81.0. If I ping it, ICMP traffic is not allowed. So ICMP traffic is not allowed in my security group. So most probably it will not work. But anyway, let me just try to do an SSH connection. For SSH, I need the security group as well. But I can show this. It will give you a prompt. If I don't even give the security group, it will say that my key is rejected. But let's just go ahead and do this. You can see here I'm getting a prompt. When I do this, when I try to connect, it's giving a prompt, but if given yes, it will say that my security key is rejected. What I need to do is I just need to copy my public key, private key here, and then connect to it. Let us do that as well. But before doing that, we can do one more thing. If I do a curl for that IP address, it should give the web page, because if you remember, we have configured a web server and we allowed a port 80 to open. That doesn't need a security key or anything. If I do this, if curl is installed, we should be getting the web page. Oh, did we do any mistake in our security group? One second, is our server started or not? Let us get connected first. Now that I have created the key locally under the name private key, I'm just going to connect to my instance again using the private key. So this is the syntax for connecting, and by now I should be connected here. If you can notice, the IP address has changed here. It is 10.81.02.07 and we were earlier in 10.81.96. So let me just go ahead and quickly check whether my HTTP server is running. Service HTTP status. Oh, okay, for some reason I think I did not put it in the advanced configuration details. If you remember, my user data field is empty, of course. That is why it is not working. It's my bad, but anyway, that is not the point of this demo. This point of this demo is to show that you can connect it to your private instance from your public instance only. You cannot connect it from through the internet because it doesn't have a publicly routable IP address. It doesn't have any public DNS names or anything. So you can reach the server only from your public instance, that is this instance, or any other resources which is residing in your public subnet. So that is the whole point of this demo that I wanted to demonstrate. That's it from me.